I'm live. Can you guys hear me now? Sorry for the technical difficulties. Please put in the chat if you can hear me. Yes. All right. We got audio. Thank you so much, Gazal. Looking forward to this presentation. Let me share my screen. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat for at the end of the presentation, or make some notes, and we'll have a Q&A at the end. This meeting is recorded and it will be sent to you automatically. All right. So just a quick disclaimer before jumping in here. Basically, this is intended for general informational and educational purposes only. And it's not a substitute for professional real estate advice. So talk to your realtor or your lawyers. This is simply for fun. All right. My name is Michael Davidson. I'm the principal and co-founder at Biosis Real Estate Development. We are a small boutique firm of 4 partners that are in Ontario. We are focusing on mid-rise to high-rise buildings. If you want to take a picture or a screenshot of my contact card, you can reach out afterwards as well, anytime if you have any questions about this project or other projects. And yes, Gazal, this will be recorded. So this case study, last webinar we did a 5-unit apartment building. This case study is an off-grid cottage development project. So my intention for today's meeting is to present the opportunities and challenges building short-term rentals in remote locations. Provide you value via knowledge transfer. Who's this presentation for? Active investors looking to develop their own new build short-term rentals, passive investors looking to expand their portfolio and take advantage of the benefits that new construction has, property owners and wholesalers looking to find new buyers, and then property owners or investors who have land but need help maximizing its value. So the story, this is a kind of a silly image, but when I was around my mid-20s, the story behind the land was I was at a music festival on a Sunday afternoon, and I was sitting on an island, something like this, and I was having the best time ever. And I thought to myself, I guarantee that I would have a much better life if I had access to a waterfront cottage. So some people dream of sailing the world, and they spend 40 years or so saving up to buy a big yacht. They go on the yacht and they get seasick. So for me, I just knew 100% sure. I didn't need to test it, but I was so interested in getting a waterfront cottage. So that same day, I ended up going on Kijiji and finding a classified ad with land for sale. And the next day, I ended up driving up to it, and I sent the offer over the phone for it by having him write a contract that says, if you give me $1,000 deposit over e-transfer, this will be yours. So I ended up buying it the very next day, and that was in 2016. So the back of the napkin is about 2.87 acres of waterfront for $21,000. And the strategy was one day to build an off-grid oasis that can generate some Airbnb income. The basic analysis that I'll go into a little bit deeper, if I can generate $40,000 to $50,000 of income on Airbnb, it would generate tons of cash flow, and we could enjoy a cottage 1 hour from the city and have other people pay for it. So this is the lot. You'll see it's about 126 meters by 71. And there's a spring-fed lake here. It's very small, and it goes about 18 feet deep. And my land goes beyond the water that way. So I'm the only person on this lot. And the closest neighbor is actually 2 kilometers away. And I'm currently living here because after I sold the property last summer, I actually ended up renting it out from the new owners and living there until my new home is built. So these are the stakes in the ground for the foundation. If you'll notice that they're slightly angled away from the lake, this is because true south is facing a certain way As you like, if you're looking straight at the picture, south is that way. And we want to maximize the amount of sun because the sun goes from east to west. So we tilted the house a bit to maximize the amount of sun capture we could have on the panels. It's my lovely wife and dog, and this is the only picture I had for the foundation because it happened very quickly. So this is the concrete foundation. I ended up building up the grade a bit, so I didn't want any moisture issues or flooding in the basement if power went out and the sump pump wasn't working. So I built it up with adding sand, and then I did I think about 4 feet underground and 4 feet above the grade. This is what the basement looks like. It has ICF, which is insulated concrete form. So that's the insulation you see here. The concrete was poured inside there, and then the bottom is rigid foam, about 2 inches. One mistake I made in the development process was right here. You'll notice a sump pump in the back right hand side of the basement. I should have put that on the other side because that's where all the utility room is anyways. So I ended up losing a pretty significant amount of space to cover up the sump pump machine and stuff like that in the basement. So I should have been on site to tell him to put it here because that would make a lot more sense. But he was just doing it himself, and he just thought that part would be a great spot for it. All right, here is the designs. So 42 feet wide and 24 feet wide, 42 feet long. Bedroom 1, 2, bathroom here, dryer, and there's a kitchen and living dining room with stairs going down to the basement. And I figured if I just had the exact same framing, the basement, I could have bedroom 3 and 4, have a big gym and a theater downstairs. So the big learning lesson here was the wood stove wasn't actually put in this corner. I ended up moving it over here, even though my architect recommended not to, and there was a mistake because I thought it would be nice to have a couch here and just watch the fire and read a book. But I realized, and that was nice when you're reading a book and seeing a fire directly. But what would have been better is having a couch here, a table here, and another couch here to have more people and have the stove visible anyways and have more access to seeing the window or the lake in the window. This is the off-grid system. So you'll notice there's this black box here. That's a direct current system. So the solar panels come in through that yellow wire. It goes into here. And then that will eventually go into what's called an inverter, which is right here. And that converts it from direct current from the solar panels to alternative current. And then that ends up going to the solar panel, the regular panel that you see here. Underneath this chest made out of pine wood is 20 kilowatt battery bank. And it's a series of battery banks to make up the 20 kilowatt battery bank. You generally need double the power of what you want because you shouldn't have certain batteries below 50% because issues start happening. So we have it pre-set up, computerized so that the batteries will last a very long time. Because if you can constantly drain it and charge it and drain it and charge it, it'll actually die a lot faster. If you've ever had a laptop or a phone that ends up dying and you need to keep it plugged in all the time, that's what we're trying to avoid with a long-term solar system. You'll see here there's a water filtration area. So the water comes in through a sand point well. So the wells are hard to predict how much they cost. Sometimes they start around $6,000 for the guy to show up, and then he can keep going and digging until he hits some water, and it can take sometimes a very long time. Because we have such a low water table where I'm at, I just put what's called a sand point well. It's basically a metal filter, and you just drill it into the sand, and eventually you hit the water table, and then you can suck the water from the pipe, and with it's a water pump. So there's a large water pump on the left-hand side in a closet, and that pumps the water through a filtration system, and that goes directly up, and then the other, you'll notice the white goes off to the side. That goes into a hot water tank that's powered by propane, and the propane will go up and heat the water. So we have hot, cold, and it's drinkable and very tasty. On the right-hand side is a Kubota diesel generator. There's an automated panel on the left side that you can't see, and this battery is to start the engine. And it's pretty much this full system, including the solar panels on top, costs around $46,000 to install. So if ever you see a property that doesn't have hydro, you're looking at least $46,000 approximately for a good system that's reliable for something like a short-term rental. And there's going to be probably issues with it over time. So the benefit of having on grid is you have full-time people. It's kind of like a shared service where, let's say, Hydro Ottawa has a ton of full-time staff making sure that nothing goes wrong and make sure there's redundancies. Here, I had a squirrel drop a nut inside the fan, and it broke my carburetor or something on this side, or my radiator, and it was leaking fuel. Sometimes small little random things will happen, and it'll go out. So you have to really make sure that, one, it's closed off so squirrels can come in, and that it's well maintained. You have to have constant oil, and there's diesel. There's a diesel pump here, or a diesel canister, and it gets pumped from there. So that's the fuel source. Sam has a question. How big is the battery bank? What sort of batteries? So there's the Rolls-Royce batteries, and I can probably send some additional information on them. I think the Rolls batteries are Rolls-Royce batteries, and yeah, I think they're lithium batteries. So it's the ones where you don't have to add water to them, because some of them you have to have water to make sure there's something to do with sodium balancing or the acid balancing, and they'll go bad if you don't add certain compounds to them. Here is the septic system. So if you've never seen a septic system, this is what they look like. You have a sanitary line that will go from the house, generally underground by a certain amount of feet so it doesn't freeze. But the sanitary lines are often hot because of the bacteria. And it'll go into this container. And then the toilet paper and it will sink down to the bottom, and the solids and the liquid will stay at the top, and eventually it'll make its way down into this system here, and then the worms will eat it, and it'll get disinfected pretty much underneath the soil. So natural composting effect here. This cost me about $7,000 to do. Hooking up to the city can cost easily $30,000. So sometimes you can save a bit of money on this, and I believe it's covered in the taxes. They'll come and pump this out every 2 years. So they'll clean out the system completely. There's just a cap on it right here. The guy comes in with the machine and sucks it clean and then drives off. And I think it costs maybe like $60 of my taxes or something like that. The framing of this was actually done by the Amish people in New York. So they shipped this up in 3 different segments, and it was kind of prefabricated of the wood parts. It was put on a truck and delivered, and they just had a crane drop in the 3 sections. They fastened it, and then they put the roof trusses afterwards, and then they put the sheathing on top of that. This is a picture of the cottage from a drone shot. So it's about 18 feet around here, and it's a bit shallower off the edge. You'll notice the solar panels up there as well. I got a close-up right here. So here's the solar panels. There's 12 panels. I believe it's 250 watts per panel, and it should end up around 3,600, I believe, is the maximum wattage, something along those lines, or 3,500. So on a peak sun in the summer with no clouds, it can generate 3,500 watts. Comparing your usage, the average person in Ontario uses about, I think, 6,000 watts per day. So in about 2 hours, you can have a full day's worth of power. I use quite a bit more because there's a water pump here. But yeah, so and the electrical coffee machine that pulls a lot of watts. But yeah, so you can definitely generate a ton of electricity with solar. In the winter, it doesn't really work that, and that's why the diesel kicks on. You'll notice there's no fence or handrail protecting anyone, so that was kind of a picture midway through production. And I'll show you some pictures of it being finalized. And we had a Starlink satellite here. This changes everything for short-term rentals because it's high-speed internet. I'm on it right now. I'm at the cottage right now, and you can't tell that there's any lag or anything. Whereas every other internet that's rural did not work. You could not have a Zoom call. You could not have any call. You cannot share your screen. You could not upload anything. It would just continually crash. So this is revolutionizing the world right now. People don't really understand how much this has changed the ability to develop in random parts of the world that are very distant from hydro poles. This porch that we built was approximately 1,300 square feet, and we also did a porch add-on as well. This is what the inside looks like. So this is the fireplace that I was talking to you about, and this is the L couch. I do enjoy it, but I think it would have been better for more space if it was located right here. It could also be more centered. And this is a professionally staged photo from the sales team that did that, and that was Tracy from Remax. So this is another shot with the handrails done, and you'll notice I put a sunshade here. That is very good, very Instagrammable, and a beautiful picture of a picnic table. And then you have the sauna. The sauna is something that people love. Saunas and hot tubs are incredibly important for Airbnbs. Anything related to water and heat, people tend to prefer over regular cottages that don't have water or any amenities. Also, some yoga mats gives off a relaxing vibe. You'll notice we got a 4.84 rating off 56 reviews. It's really important to make sure your customers are happy, especially in the beginning. If there's any complaints and you lose, I believe it's below 4.8, you end up losing your status as a superhost, and then you don't show up on the homepage and your bookings plummet. So it's really important to maintain superhost status, and you do that by hitting certain thresholds, a certain amount of nights per quarter, and each quarter it gets renewed if you still have it rented pretty well and you have enough star ratings and no complaints. So the back of the napkin development. So I realized, and there's something called AirDNA, which is on the next slide, that can show you the average income for different areas, but it would take about 50 days of rental to cover the mortgage payments. And then there's 315 days left to cover additional costs. So in the first year that we posted it on Airbnb, it was approximately $50,000 of Airbnb income, and we managed it ourselves. There's a company called Short and Sweet out of Ottawa that manages it, and she recently told me that it's about 20%. She's the largest short-term Airbnb rental manager in Ottawa, and it's about 20% if you're going to have somebody else manage it. The cap rate, it sold at about 6.5 or 6.6%, meaning if you bought the property in cash and you're renting on Airbnb, you'd get a 6.6% return. I got debt on it before the sale. It was $178,000. It was around 4%, and it came to around a $800 mortgage payment. The build cost was around $300,000 all in, and the sale price was $490,000. So AirDNA is a huge asset if you're going to be doing short-term rentals. You can look up any area, show what the occupancy rates are and the daily rate, and basically dive into different neighborhoods. And this is just the free version, but you can go into very granular data, which neighborhoods are bringing in the most revenue, has the best occupancy, and I'll show you a rating from 0 to 100 on how hot the market is. So the numbers in a little bit more granularity, we got $21,000 for the land. This works out to about, there's 1,000 square feet above grade, and then another 1,000 square feet in the basement. So we're looking at $2.10 a square foot for land, which is very cheap, and $1 per buildable. So the land was extremely cheap. I got very lucky. Build cost, $271,000 all in, 4% interest costs, is $11,000 approximately. It's very difficult to say exactly how much cash I used because I was using a lot of student lines of credit, and I used a construction loan as well. So it's going to be hard to pinpoint exactly how much cash was used versus lines of credit, but I have some estimates, just some general examples of what the return on investment would be. Next slide. So the total cost with interest is 304. The sales price is for 490. There was somebody who put an offer on for $625,000. Another person who put a verbal on it for 529. So it almost closed for 625, but the interest rates skyrocketed. The guy had bad credit, and they ended up walking away from the deal. And interest rate increases kind of had a major impact on that. And then the Airbnb ban. So there was a huge fire that ended up killing, I believe, 7 people March of last year. And they started banning Airbnbs and changing the zoning very quickly. So they said I could have a permit, and they said I couldn't anymore. And then they basically fined me $3,500 or so, or $3,700 for having this listed, even though it was after the fact. They actually came to the cottage, took pictures, checked the listings, and did kind of a forensic analysis to show that I did in fact rent this place out. And they charged me, $3,700. So I just see it as another fee. I'm still grateful I hosted it on Airbnb because there was so much income that came in. Gross profit, $185,000. That doesn't include the $50,000 of income minus the expenses. The closing fees for the realtor and the lawyer, $13,000, and the net profit was about $172,000. So what was the return on investment? It's a great question. As I mentioned before, I didn't calculate exactly how much was invested. However, if you were to say it took $100,000 of cash as an example, and I bought it in 2016, so I held on to it till 2023. That would be it'd be about 7 years. And if you take the profit of around $170,000 and you put in 100, but you get 170, you get 170% return. 170% return, and this would normally be built in less than a year from the beginning to the end. But because I bought it in 2016 and held on to it, even if you were to divide the cash used, even though that $100,000 wouldn't have been on year one because it's only $21,000, but basically, even if you put $100,000 and it took you 6 years to build, you would still make 22% internal rate of return compounded. So it would beat the stock market significantly. But it was mostly done on lines of credit. So some main learnings: do more due diligence on the Airbnb permit process and the market. Know the true cost of building before starting. Getting a turnkey price as a starting point is really good instead of estimates, because there's so many things you can't really find out. But if you ask people, what can you build a house for? They'll generally tell you a cost per square footage. And if you ask somebody to provide a turnkey price, there's going to be additional margins, so you'll know exactly kind of the highs of where it would cost. Design it for Airbnb. So I would put less space for easier cleaning and maintenance, and I'd make it more Instagrammable. People love taking pictures, and the more pictures you can take, the better for your business. Off-grid can complicate maintenance and reliability. I would go on-grid for less headaches. I don't think I would ever go off-grid again unless there was a massive upside or some sweet deal on a property in the middle of nowhere that I love. But I would highly recommend staying away from off-grid. Focus on reviews to attain superhost status, and play with pricing. Keep prices higher in advance, then reduce them closer to the date. We are averaging $175 per night at our place, but on the top best nights, we got about $450 around New Year's and peak summer times. I'd also recommend hiring a bookkeeper early and setting up systems for tracking invoices. And I would also build it sooner by raising capital with other people's money for faster returns. So if I bought it in 2016, the lumber would have been cheaper. I could have held on to it, rented it out, started making, $50,000 a year. It would have paid off pretty much in by the time I sold it. The main message is, if you have a project, you don't want to sit on it because you're losing money by not having the returns. So we're going to have a Q&A, but first we're just going to talk a bit about what's next. What are we doing next? So I'm currently building a dream house, and I'll be doing a webinar on that. So this is a house in Ottawa that I'm really excited about. This is for me and my wife. And this is what the insides will look like. So these are drawings from online. We went to Fiverr and got a designer. These are just mock-ups, and they look incredible and they look super real, but we got 17-foot ceilings, and we have, it's 4 beds, 3 baths, and it comes with 2 rental units on the side, on the left-hand side of the building. If you take a look over here. So this side is mine with 2-car garage, and then this side is 2 rentals. The mortgage on it, yeah, I'll get into that on the next webinar, but it already got appraised at $2 million, which is super exciting. And the build cost could come in around 1.6 or 1.7. And the mortgage will be mostly paid off by tenants. So I get to live in a multi-million-dollar building for pretty much $2,000 a month. There's some pictures that are more advanced in this because these are from last week, but we're going to be finishing framing very soon. And this is accelerating very quickly. And this is a panelized system too. So it's moved very quickly in the last week or two, and everything should be done, including the roof and the windows, in about 3 to 4 weeks. We are now working on mid-rises as well. So we're excited for this project. This is a project on Parkdale Avenue, close to the LRT train, light rail train. And it's about 6 floors high. It's going to have a concrete podium, and we'll also be doing a webinar on this as well. It's 104 units, and the returns are looking pretty good. So I'll definitely, if you're interested in seeing how to develop large-scale buildings and make even more money in close to the same amount of time, I will be doing a webinar on that shortly as well. So lastly, services we provide. So if you want a feasibility analysis to show what's it going to cost or anything along those lines, or timelines, feel free to reach out, and we'll make sure that to help you know your you can build it and it's profitable and avoid some major areas that can cause you harm. Architectural design and project approvals to get you your permits to build sooner. So we offer architectural services as well. That's one of my co-founders as well in the company, Sam Hirschhorn, who's in the chat. He's a great architect and helped build a lot of help design a lot of the stuff we've been working on. And then lastly, construction management. If you want someone like myself to be there, I've experienced building. I'm on my 3rd build, and I'm learning lots on the way. If you need help, I'm happy to help you. All right. Questions? Any questions I can answer from our users last time? This was a lot of the favorite part, was getting these questions answered. Curious on who has any questions about the project. I'd love to go and dive deep. Any questions? Okay, I'll stick around, but that concludes the presentation. You should receive a webinar link shortly. If you do want to ask any questions, please put them in the comment to everybody, and I will stay on for another 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, Sam Hirschhorn, great question. How was the permitting process in Quebec? That's actually a great question. So very different than Ontario. I literally drew the design and sent it to them, but in the permit, just kind of an outline of how big the lot was. And I sent them the engineered trusses for the framing and the roof, and basically they approved it right away. And they didn't have any inspectors show up throughout the whole process. There was only one inspector because the local government has the local population is about 900. So there's one inspector, and they weren't around. So they didn't even show up to the job site at all. So it's completely Wild West. Whereas in Ottawa, they come every part of the process before you pour the foundation, after you do the framing and plumbing, electrical. They didn't even look at anything. Dealing with locals in a rural setting, that is a great question as well. So there's always conflict in when you come into a new town where people have been here for multiple generations. There's a lot of friction they think they own the properties around, even though if it's not Crown land. So when I bought the property originally, people would come to the lake and they would jump in and have some fun on their 4x4s. But when I bought the property, I put a gate on. So there's always tension you got to be careful of. So that's why it's important. One of my neighbors actually cut off access to a large, like 1,000 acres of Crown land, and somebody blew up her house, like left the gas stove on and just lit a fire, which is pretty crazy. She ended up closing it off anyways, tightening it up, and then it moved on. But we do have, in the country, there are people that are definitely different than city people. But a lot of them are great. I have great neighbors. And sometimes you want to get a land, go there on the weekend, Friday, Saturday, see if there's any activity in peak summertime, to see if there's any shenanigans going on, and maybe go to the local pubs or something like that and get to know people, or the local gas station or whatever. All right, we've got a question for Matt. From Matt, the dream house, I think you mentioned used an online design service. Can you outline what that looked like a bit more, and what was the overall cost for design services, from pre-design to permit, construction drawings, etc.? So the drawings cost $17,000 for the whole place. There was a lot of revisions. Normally you can budget $8,500 to $13,000 for architectural drawings, and we had to do multiple revisions because we were in a flood zone, and we had to build it above the flood zone, and interest rates went up, so I went from a single family house into a triplex, and then the laws changed, so there's a lot of things that changed that racked up the design costs. And the design for interior, the modeling that you saw, was about $1,000. So this was a person in, I believe, India, and he's incredible, has really good reviews on Fiverr, and it was super inexpensive compared to other designers. No mock-ups. When I asked somebody from the UK or Canada, they would say it's a minimum of $1,000, and that just includes maybe 5 to 6 hours of consulting with no images at all. So sometimes if you go offshore, you can save a ton of money and get way more value. We got 3D images, like that would normally cost $3,000 to $5,000 here. Blaine has a question. When you were managing the maintenance, cleaning, finances of the property, how much time did it take away from your other obligations? Great question, Blaine. I would say not too much. What I would do is every time I bought something, you'd keep the receipts, and then I would track it on a Visa card, and then I would just export the CA data on the Visa card statements over to an Excel spreadsheet and keep track of it there. And then I would calculate how much things cost, and all the e-transfers, I would just export a report to all the contractors that I sent and calculate it that way. But nowadays, what I do for my new projects is I don't pay until I have an invoice, and I put it into an unpaid invoice, and then once I pay it, I move it to paid invoices, and then I have a separate tracker that will calculate exactly where we are on the process for each invoice. That's the best way to do it. Got a question from Carl. What was your cost price per square foot to build the triplex in Ottawa? So right now it's not done, so we don't know, but the cost per square foot will be, with taxes, around, I think it's $242.50, and that is saving a lot of money. With certain strategies, like we got a discount on the windows. The cost was a bit higher because we have a steel frame system on the north and the south side of the building, because we're so close to the lot line, because we maximize the footprint, that the neighboring houses, if there's ever a fire, the city of Ottawa wanted us to be protected. So basically they asked us to make the whole wall steel, which ended up costing an extra $40,000. So yeah, I would say buildable square foot cost, if you ask a contractor that it will do turnkey, they're saying minimum 300. And if you look at there's a report that goes over custom homes, and they say it's around $350 to like $700 a square foot if you want to go custom. So the sky's the limit for custom. And I'd say on row houses that are stacked, like stacked townhomes, you're looking at probably 180 is what the report I believe said that came out this year, and that's super cheap. That's like vinyl siding and basically cookie cutter house with no good finishes. Samuel said, yeah. So Samuel just made a note here. So I hired a designer for the pictures, and Samuel Hirschhorn was the architect. So that's getting everything properly done with, how many studs are going to be used in the house and working with the city. The person in India could not do that because there's a lot of regulations that they're not privy to in Ottawa, or it'd be very difficult to work with. So Samuel Hirschhorn did the architectural designs, and the person on Fiverr did the interior design images. Carl said, are you going to do another cottage build now that you have sold? I might, if it's profitable. I'm always open to looking at projects. I would say they would have to be in a good area with a high potential for Airbnb income. I'd probably have a lot of conditions to buy it. Maybe I would have to get an Airbnb permit before on the close date or something like that. And the numbers would have to be a good deal. Also, this land could be severed into 2 lots, which is pretty interesting. The average cost for land in Quebec for farmland is about $5,000, and in Ontario it's about $10,000. So when I was doing the math on this, I said, wow, 3 acres for $21,000, it's a great deal. And if I could split it and make 2 houses, that'd be cool as well. I would have had to design it differently because I have my well that would have been the road to the second lot, but it's still doable and still possible for the new owners to split this up and add an additional cottage on it. Sweet. Any other questions? All right. If you have any questions, you can always email me. Oh, we got Matt. Matt has another question. Thank you, Matt. We have, this is a bit of a broad question, but what are the rules, legalities around using Airbnb as an income? Great question, Matt. So you basically declare it as regular income. So any income you have, there's different types of stuff you do with taxes. So you can either take the taxes and then give it to the government at the end of the year or quarterly, or you can basically have Airbnb take care of that, and then they'll send the HST directly. You got I got a question privately. Did you have trouble sourcing contractors being so remote? Actually, no. And if you have farms nearby, there's generally some pretty handy people. It's hard to find out who are the best contractors. And because it's a small village, a lot of people won't say anything poorly about anyone else because they'll sometimes live with each other for multiple generations. And that bad blood goes on. But yeah, it would be good to commit to meet with people first, because there was some contractors that were not fun to work with. They had a lot of personal issues that kind of bled into the job site. And then you meet some really awesome people they're just great. They show up on time, they get the work done, and they're fairly priced. So I would say no. And you can always ask around the gas stations, look online. There's generally community groups on Facebook right now where you can say, does anyone know any builders or licensed carpenters, etc. Matt, originally it seemed you could rent your own home only. Can you own 4 different houses and rent them all on Airbnb? So different localities will have, like Ottawa right now, you can only rent your home. So if you have a personal residence, you can rent your house. And if you have 4 different houses, you could not rent them all on Airbnb unless you had some type of hotel permit. Sweet. Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. If you have any more questions, my email is here. Take a picture or a screenshot or send me a message on any social media platform. Looking forward to talking to you further and really appreciate your time, and thanks for showing up.